Okay, and if you wish to address the board, there are sign-up sheets in the back, and if you'll turn them in to this gentleman here on the end, I will call the roll. And I'm sorry, you'll have to state your name, our attorney
Sure.
tonight.
Lenore Brakefield,
Thank you.
subbing for Tony.
Thank you very much. And Supervisor Tinkle is here, Supervisor Banks, Supervisor Feinberg, Supervisor Guy, Supervisor Flaherty, and our district manager is here somewhere, he'll be in shortly, Chris Shoemaker, and our CPA from Infomart is Stephen Glenn. And do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, we do. First up is Joe Schofield.
I'm Joe Schofield from Pelican Preserve Carina neighborhood, and I'm here to talk about we're putting sidewalks in the Prado section, which is required by the city of Fort Myers. And I had an on-site meeting with Chris and the engineering firm, RWA, the contractor, and a few other folks. And some of the questions that came up were, was the land going to be surveyed to ensure the property or the sidewalks are put in the right location? Moving infrastructure that's already been put into the properties by WCI or Lennar when they built the houses. And the fact that these properties are now all privately owned properties. And in conversation at the site, the question was, how are the concrete sidewalks going to be constructed? And basically, they have a blueprint that shows them excavating, putting concrete in, putting supports along the side framework. There was no consideration for the landscaping, no consideration for replacing those people's yards. And the comment on the subbase, which is a city requirement by code, was basically we'll just put a little down and tamp it. When I talked with Mr. Bill Porter, who was the city engineer, the first thing he reminded me of was you're dealing with private property now. It's no longer Lennar property. Those owners need to be notified that this is going to take place officially. Now, I've done that unofficially for those that are around, but I think it's incumbent either upon the CDD or Lennar to make sure those people are aware of what's happening and what the schedule is. Secondly, the city engineer, when I talked about the construction, said, you folks tend to forget that you are not a municipality. City codes prevail in Pelican Preserve as part of the city. Therefore, all the codes of the city are required to be met, meaning permitting, construction design, and so forth. He told me that basically concrete requires a 5-inch subbase of lime rock that's compressed to a certain density. There are some other ways of doing it, but they require testing and certification. The engineer at the site basically said, well, your engineer approved it, which is Tetra Tech. I requested they supply the data to prove what they're stating. I mean, you can say anything, but we, as a board here, should require documentation to ensure that things are being put in right. My experience, the last time I dealt with a sidewalk was they were not put in right, and we did not take any action for whatever reason. So I'm just requesting that this time, we make our engineer, Tetra Tech, stand up to the plate and swing the bat for us, and not allow RWA or Lennar to put a sidewalk in that's going to be substandard unless they can provide documentation that they're allowed to do it. And then we should question why. I thank you.
When we have Tetra Tech come up during their portion of it, we'll ask him about that.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Questions? Joe? Do you have a set of the plans for that project?
I do not.
We need to see the plans. Are the sidewalks within the road right away, which are publicly owned roads?
They are.
Is the sidewalk parallel to, adjacent to, and abutting the road, or is there a grass strip in between?
There's a grass strip in between.
And it's called for. Does the deed of any one of those homes, anyone, just pick one, does it show an easement and or a right-of-way that acknowledges a sidewalk is to be built?
When I looked at the prints a couple of months ago, the sidewalk was on those plats. I can't state that it was on the plats the owners were receiving, because when I bought my house, I had easements that were not on the plats either. So the plats that they're passing out from a sales office do not necessarily match what's officially being done on the property.
I'm not so worried about the plat, I'm more worried about the individual property survey that had to be
I
transferred.
can't answer that, Ed, I don't
It might not be a bad idea to go check, but I think, they think the issue is that first we want to see what those plans called for in the way of the prep. I agree, there ought to be some type of a base on that, and then there's usually a description of whether there's any type of steel put in, and then what the thickness of the concrete is, and then most importantly, if you're going to do it, I hate to use the expression half-assed, they should have done this and put them in before the property owners came in and landscaped.
Well,
Why
I
you did it
checked
after
on
the
that
fact is
too.
beyond me.
The process is not to install a sidewalk till a house is built. The reason for that is they don't want to be running construction equipment over the sidewalk and breaking it. That's very logical. I mean, I agree, I don't have an issue
Your only
with that.
problem is you've got lots being built at different stages. So you build a sidewalk 50 feet, build another one, skip it, build it 50 feet. You don't build sidewalks that way.
I'll say
Two-
that's the
two
way they did
issues-
it in Stony
two
Brook.
issues that
That's
came
not
up.
the way to do it.
There's trees in the way, they have to be moved. Lennar was not prepared, in fact, the fellow who was there really wasn't even aware that there were trees in the way. When I asked about when they take the framework out, after the concrete is poured, will they be putting grass back in place? The contractor said that was not part of his scope of work. Lennar said, oh, well, that's ours, but they weren't prepared to answer that either. So what you really have is a plan. You're required to put a sidewalk in. We're required, actually, I think we already own it, even though we haven't seen it.
Are they, do we have an issue with water meters, irrigation meters,
Yep.
and or
You have
clean outs?
Fire hydrants, you have water meters.
All within the area?
All
where it's
within
been
the
done?
area where that sidewalk is going. And when they go further down the street, you also now have a yield sign that's gonna have to be moved. So there's a lot of issues there that we thought this was just a straight plain Jane, put the sidewalk in and say, thank you, ma'am. But that is not the case. And I do not think the planning has been thoroughly thought out and worked on. And I think there's a lot of loopholes that, after the fact, you're gonna be asked to not accept something, which I believe has been accepted, but the fact is, it's not gonna meet the codes. And I think we need to finally stand up and have our engineers stand up and say to Lennar or the engineer that they've hired, we need to have all these i's dotted and t's crossed. We just
The
can't
city of
keep
Fort
going.
Myers is responsible for, it's their code that is supposed to be being built. Why aren't they stepping in and saying,
Margaret,
hey,
they
guys,
have
you
to
gotta
be
do it right?
informed.
Okay.
If they are not informed, as Bill Porter told me, he has nothing on record for any inspectors to go out there. Nothing has been applied for. There's no permits that he's aware of that have been applied for. You may also have to check with the building code department in the city of Fort Myers. But from the permitting standpoint, there's no permits, no inspector. I know that inspections are required once the base is put down, and then there's inspection required after the concrete is poured. So there should be 2 inspections by the city. But you have to reach out to the city to have that arranged.
Margaret, Tony's on the line, if you want to punch him in.
He is?
You want any more questions, or can I answer anything else?
We'll hear more from Danny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another speaker?
Yes. Charles Schaefer, Bellcrest Boulevard, irrigation. What's the issue?
All right, thank you. If I told you I could probably save you $6 million, would you be interested?
What's your cut?
None. I got some handouts here I want to pass on, so you guys can go along with me here.
If we meet after the,
Are you buying? Only if you're buying. I think it's 2. I'll get it.
Thank you.
You can go. Now, the reason I'm coming up with this is because of this Hawthorne well. The generator is supposed to go with it. The FPL irrigation system and this $3 million storage tank. All of which I think we don't need. So what I had to do, I had to come up with a baseline, and what I did was I decided to pick this house. There's a friend of mine, lives right across here in this little WCI community. And I went with a standard lot of 50 by 100, which is 5,000 square feet. And then I subtracted out of that the footprint of the house along with the driveway, which is approximately 3,000 square feet, which leaves 2,000 square feet of lawn to be irrigated. Now, to irrigate that lawn one night, it's going to take 620 gallons of water. So that's my base. 620 gallons of water, 2,000 square foot per home in all of Gateway for all 6,000 EAUs, which is commercial and residential. Now, on the second page, you'll see there for your information, there's 3 periods, 2 months each, where we're drawing more than 200 million gallons of water to irrigate. This is what they consider their periods of high demand, where our irrigation pumps are running at 100%. At peak demand, we're running 100,000 gallons a month. Now, if you take that 100,000 gallons and you divide it by our current 16 watering days we have a month, that's 4 days a week, 4 weeks in a month, that's 16 days. It'll give you an average of 6,250,000 gallons a night of water is what we use. Like I said, now you take that 6,000 EAUs, which is residential and commercial, you gotta figure 3,000 of those EAUs is watering on Saturday, Wednesday. The other 3,000 is watering on Sunday, Thursday. You got your odd addresses and your even addresses. If you take those 3,000 EAUs times that 620 gallons, you come up with 1,860,000 gallons a night is what we're using. Now remember, I said we're using 6,250,000 a night. The EAUs are only using 1.86. So where's the other 4,390,000 gallons going? The only answer I can come up with is the CDE common areas, which is this street, Gateway Boulevard, Commerce, wherever you have it, I don't know. So I said, okay, so how are you gonna get around this? You also gotta figure that we're not built out yet. We're only at 6,000 EAUs. Arborwood's gonna add 900 more, and that annex area is gonna be an additional 400, which is gonna give us a total of 7,300 EAUs. If our pumps are maxed out at 6,000 already, how are we gonna handle these extra 1,300 EAUs without drilling the well? So I did all the addition there. I took that times the 620 also at 3,650 EAUs. And you can see what it comes up with. And what it is additional 403,000 gallons a night. So that total still comes up to 6,653,000. Now the CD common area, that equation doesn't change because your roads aren't growing as of right now. The only thing that's really growing is the EAUs. We're adding more and more of those. So the solution is, we're currently watering 4 times a week. My solution, go to 6 times a week. Use Tuesday and Friday for the CDB's common areas. That way you're going from, at build out, we're going from 100% capacity down to 33% on our pumps. For the 2 days that I think you should be watering on Tuesday and Friday, now those pumps are running at 66% instead of 100. You can further spread that out on your 2 days there by taking different zones. You can add them to Saturday and Sunday, let's say 10% of this, and now you got all your pumps running at 45% every day. That'll help you in your overflow problem. But now you can figure out how much of that 1.3 million gallons of recycled water we have that you can use every day, and figure that in there. If you don't have an overflow problem,
Tony,
then you don't need
we
that
got a
irrigation system.
speaker at the podium right now. Sorry, I
Sorry.
apologize. Go ahead.
So if you don't have an overflow problem, excuse me, then you don't need that $850,000 irrigation system, and you don't need an additional $2 million gallon tank. And if you do have an overflow problem, there are two other ways to take care of it. You can pump it into those isolated ponds you have, or you can drain it directly into the lakes.
And, Ms. Schaefer, I don't mean to cut you off, and I'll respond briefly that the 5 minutes is up
Okay.
for the speaking. And I will let you know that we have been working diligently with some of the master metered communities, Magnolia Lakes and Daniels Preserve in particular, to take them off those peak times. And you also have a large, let me say 25% of the residents that water 5 days a week. And it's hard to get a handle on that enforcement-wise. But we're trying to spread that demand around and go to more watering days, especially with the big users, and number one, ourselves, taking those medians and that off that prime watering time.
Yeah, so if you just add Tuesday, Friday in there, you're pretty much taking care of your problem.
And we're doing that with the two communities and altering their internal schedules to do that as a test, and that's underway right now.
Okay.
Spread that demand out.
Anybody got questions?
Yeah, I have several, Charles. That's a good layman's start on this, but there's some holes. What did you use for peak to average ratios?
Well, that was based on, I believe it was your utility manager at a meeting sometime back. He was the one that brought that up at the meeting, saying that we're at,
Utility manager, who?
I don't know what his name was.
Kenny?
He might have been the other guy that's not here anymore.
Well, first of all, there's a significant issue with peaks to average ratio, which really causes a lot of problem. Second of all, I'm from Gateway Greens, know that area very well. They have 55 separate common area meters whose total volume equal all 1,300 homes. You haven't accounted for that. And every community in Gateway has it. Common areas use one heck of a lot of our water.
Yes, I know
And then
that.
the
And
third
that's
one-
why, when I figured in the commercial, they're all concrete and parking lots.
Yeah,
It has
commercial's
very
allowed.
little,
Minimal.
minimal, and that's over 900 EAUs.
And then
So
the
I'm
third-
taking 2,000 square foot for all those 900 EAUs and figuring it in there.
And then the third one that you're not recognizing, which is the illegality of our watering system. We have house after house after house. We're under a water notice that you can only water twice a week.
No, that's not true.
That is true. That's
No,
Lee
it's
County.
not true.
That is Lee County.
If you are using reclaimed water, you can water 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
I don't know who told you that, but that's not.
Well, let me read it to you.
Well, that certainly, let me just say, that's not the problem is only 25% of our product is reclaimed, and that's 100% reclaimed water on a reclaimed water system, where we're using groundwater, so we're treated just like a regular groundwater utility, not reclaimed water.
That's the problem.
Well, if my 5 minutes wasn't enough, I could argue that point also. Because your graph right here shows you're using more than 25%.
The issue is that we have a lot of people that are watering way more than they're supposed to be watering. And that hurts our situation.
And I'll just say thank you for the calculations that you've done, and I'm sure that Kenny would be more than happy to take a look at them and see if there's any information there that would be useful for him.
All right.
They
Thank
will
you.
meet you outside afterward for the 6 mil.
Excuse me, may I?
Yes.
Yeah, and you're better on this than I, but on a quick look, it appears that there may be some validity.
Yeah, he's got some right ideas. It's the issue is that we got peak problem, peak to average ratios. And the second one is we've got a lot of other users that are unaccounted for here, which are the HOA and common areas. A lot of usage of water in those areas.
Maybe we have to start accounting for it.
We've got a system to do it, all we gotta do is enforce it.
But I think the point is, and I think staff is doing this, sort of looking at alternatives to what we have today. And I think it's great that you put in the time and the effort to bring this to our attention, because I think we need to be looking at this from multiple angles and coming up with several solutions and options to vet out, besides just digging wells and spending a ton of money.
Yeah, the other one that people don't understand on irrigation is that we have two problems. We have the good and the bad. The bad being, we don't have enough water. We're peaking this year at the 8,000, or a little less than that, 8,000 gallon per minute. We don't, and we can't pull out of the ground enough water. So that's the bad side. We need more water to meet the peaks. On the good side is that during the summertime, when we're getting all the rains, we have an agreement with Lee County that we have to use every drop of water that they produce, or we renege on the contract. We don't want to renege on the contract because they'll take it back, which means we have to dump water someplace. Right now, we're dumping water, and people call me and ask me, if not once a day, at least every other day, what are you people doing watering Gateway Boulevard when it's raining? We're watering Gateway Boulevard when it's raining because those tanks over there are full and we have no place to dump it except on the ground. So that was the reason for going out into the FPL easement and putting in this overflow where it's not harmful to anything. So those are why those expenditures are in there. And then the third one was, we have 1,700 more homes yet to be built in the next 5 to 10 years. They are going to have a demand on the north end of our, predominantly the north end of our system, that already has pressure problems. That's why that storage tank and the pump is up there to handle Prado, Pistoia, Matarita, Casella, Hampton Park, and Stony Brook, all of whom have low pressure problems. And only gonna get worse when those 1,700 homes get built. So that's why those numbers are in there. I don't wanna spend that money any more than anybody does. The reality is, how many people wanna go out there, turn on your irrigation system, and have it look like some little boy peeing? Nothing's gonna come out. So we've got issues to address, they're engineering issues, and they are what they are.
Do we have any other speakers?
Mr. Jim Brand, Gateway Commons Pool and PT contract.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and board members. Thank you all for your time. I want to first of all say to Mr. Banks and Mr. Guy and the whole board, thank you for attending the Stony Brook Meet the Candidates event last night.
First one.
It was a great event. The people in the audience did an awesome job with great questions. I'm not so sure our answers always measured up to the questions, but we did our best. So thank you for that. The first thing I want to talk about, I send out an email every 3 or 4 weeks to about 650 people. When I was a board resident director in Hampton Park, it was all about Hampton Park. Lately, it's been about other issues. So I had an email response from a lady named Jerry Turk. She said, issues regarding the common pool at Gateway Services CDD fees keep going up, and we have seen some deterioration regarding the upkeep of the pool facilities. Now, I talked to Chris, he knows about this email, so I'm not blindsiding him or anybody else. I wouldn't want to do that. They had promised, Gateway Services, 9 months ago, that they would be fixing or replacing the doors going into the washrooms as they are rusting badly. The showers also have had tiles lifted and are getting worse, although they have a rubber matting over them. They still have not fixed the soffits that were ripped apart from Hurricane Irma on each side of the main building. It seems that within the last 6 months or so, the pool decking, etc., is not kept up like before. My complaint is with Gateway Services are not addressing the problems at the pool. Now, I talked to Chris about this, and he shared with me that because of Irma, we had a really difficult time getting contractors to come out and even give us a bid. The money's in the contract. Please don't kick this can down the road. Get the Gateway Commons pool repaired. I know it's a big dollar amount.
We have it in our CIP. I think that was part of our budget
Yes.
discussions, and
Yes.
that had to be done.
Yes, it does, and I just wanted, this is just a reminder, and I'm just saying, please, Don't kick this can down the road. The second thing I want to speak about is the Tetra Tech contract. Once again, I communicated with Chris, and he shared the contract with me, the marked up contract. In the contract itself, it has the schedule of hourly rates. And these are hourly rates, and I multiplied them by 2,000 hours to get an annual rate, and then I took a 10% discount because they say if you do cost plus projects, you get a 10% less cost than the hourly rate. So a principal in charge, $340 an hour. That's $680,000 a year for a principal in charge. You take 10% off, that's $612,000 for a principal in charge. An engineer two, $220,000 a year, $198,000 with a 10% discount. An engineer two, senior engineer two, $450, $405. And I went through about 20 of the rates. My question is this. This is from the proposal. Has the pricing, has these costs been negotiated as you worked with Tetra Tech? That's my first question. The second question, in the old contract, Tetra Tech engineers would show up and they didn't get paid. In the new contract, they get paid, which is great. I agree with that. And if you have two engineers come, you pay the highest rate of the one engineer, but you only pay for one at the highest rate. My question is, what will be used to determine that an engineer needs to come to the meeting? Many times I've been here and the only thing they do is read a report that's in your book. So I hope that you come up with a way of determining when and if and why an engineer needs to come to be paid. Hopefully they don't come very often. The next thing is, in Article 2, you talk about methods of authorization, and it mentions projects and tasks. Last night in the discussion with Doug, I learned that Chris and his team are implementing Microsoft Project Management, MSPM, right? Are you requiring Tetra Tech to use Microsoft Project Manager or some similar software to manage the projects that they do on our behalf? And then finally and lastly, I could not find in the contract, and I've only had it a few hours, shame on me, but I couldn't find in the contract that there were any consequences for non-performance. If they don't perform as they should, they're late on a project, or they go cost overruns, they're not on time, their project's incomplete, what happens? Do you pay them anyway, or do you penalize them? I couldn't find that in the contract. I did contracts in my professional life for 40 years. If a contract didn't have consequences for non-performance, we didn't sign the damn contract. You all shouldn't sign the contract until you amend it and put consequences for non-performance. Thank you. Time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Brand.
Yes, sir.
And the last speaker that
Or, Chris, are we gonna have a discussion of this issue later, under the
Yes.
contract? Okay.
sure it'll be brought up and.
It's 5B.
And Mr. Measy would like to speak. He said he'd like to hold his remarks until the agenda item on the golf cart issue. And that is all the speakers that we have for today.
All right. And that will move us to 3A, which is the auditing service proposal, which was a little light reading for all of us. So, would you like to
Sure.
take this?
Sure. Just kind of the background. A couple meetings ago, the board requested that we advertise an RFP for auditing services. We did that. We included in there the ad, and then we also created the criteria. From that RFP, we received 5 proposals. We have summarized those proposals and provided the board with, as mentioned, some light reading on each of them. So you have 5 firms that have submitted their proposals, and then you have the summary in front of you that shows the fees. It's a 3-year contract. It would go from fiscal year 2018, which is the current year, and through fiscal year 2020. And we have showed the fees for each of them and a total. And in addition to that, we have shown 3 other columns, including the first column, which was a little bit of, we customized that one per the board's request to include, any, if they had any, issues, action items taken against them, that type of thing. That was the first 25 points. The next 25 points was district experience and knowledge. And then the third 25 points was staff depth and ability to perform. And then the last 25 points were fees. From this summary, as well as your packages, the next page on here would allow you then to rank each of the proposals, come up with a total score, and then we can do the, all the total ranking from everybody. And then you do have a separate agenda item to actually accept whatever, because you guys are, the board is the audit committee. So the next agenda item would be to accept whatever the audit committee has recommended in terms of the firms.
I have one question too, it may be the same one, so. go ahead.
No, you go first.
Under fee, since you've got points in here already, I noticed 2 of them were identical, but their fees are not identical.
It's
So-
rounding.
Rounding,
Yes.
okay, I wondered how you came to that.
It's basically done off a percentage. The lowest one gets the most points, and then, kind of goes from there. And then, yeah, if there's some rounding, we just kind of round it to, so that you don't get point, blah, 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 4 digits or whatever across. And you're referring to this, so basically Burger Tombs, Elon, Gaines, and Frank has the same 21 points as Keith does.
So, I guess my question is, if I were ranking them, they wouldn't be the same point.
And we put that in just to kind of give you some reference.
Okay.
That's nothing set. The entire ranking sheet is done, each board member will do their own. And we just kind of put that in to kind of give you some guide on how you can do it. It's up to you from that point forward to rank it based on the 4 criterias and the pointage with, the points assigned, a max of 25 points for each criteria. And then from there, we'll add them up.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Fenton?
I have several.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. One is, I was wondering if there could be a PowerPoint presentation yearly to the board. There is nothing in any of the proposals.
And I'm assuming when you say PowerPoint, you mean from the firm presenting the audit.
Right.
That is up, again, if that is something that the board collectively wants to do, and we would negotiate it and put it into the contract, I'm assuming it's not gonna be included in these fees. We'd have to address that. I don't think it'd be a huge issue. I mean, we're not talking about a 50 slide.
No.
Most of them, what they do would be put up the audit, and we use that, kind of as the PowerPoint, and they just kind of walk through the schedules.
With our graphs, right?
And I could put together some graphs based on the fund.
There, none of them are here, because you noticed I have.
That's not usually a standard part of a proposal,
I have
is for,
questions.
for that part of it.
I did also make my own graph, or chart,
Okay?
what I thought was important when I looked at these and read them thoroughly. So that's how I also rated. There was some differences, but you probably, because they're not here, I can't answer the questions. I'll leave it with that, but I think a PowerPoint presentation yearly is something that is better than just a verbal and a written thing and all that.
Wake her up.
Oh, I'm sorry, you said you had several questions,
Well,
and it was
I
only
can't.
2.
I know, but I can't ask any of them because nobody's here, and I did put little markers in my books.
Go ahead.
I've got several. Bill, I'm gonna go back to what you said, and I think I'm going to go along with it, in that when you're ranking these people, I think, and I will paraphrase what you said, they're all knowledgeable and basically level, so that's tough, with the understanding they all understand the scope of work, which is my problem. I'm a little bit of a duck out of the water on this, but so I'll ask the question. Stephen, single audit fee, what is it, and do we need it?
Yes, you will need it anytime that the district spends over, and the threshold now is $750,000 related to state or federal funding, then a single audit is required. State revolving loan will count as a part of that. And most, when you read the agreements, from the state revolving loan, if you went through the entire contract, there will be a section in there about audit requirements, and requiring a single audit. There's normally a report that is above and beyond a standard audit.
When I read the proposals, the only one that differentiated, as I could read the proposals, was McDermott Davis made it clear that if a single audit fee was required, their fee would be $10,500 higher, which they were the low bidder of $49,500. All of a sudden, they become $60,000 right in the middle of all the rest. I started calling these people and asking them questions. And I found real quickly that I don't think that we've got apples and oranges at this point. For example, I talked to Keith McCullough, Bill Benson, I believe, and was asking Bill questions about it, and nothing against what you may have prepared in the way of the deal, but I said, when we had our audit finding a couple of weeks ago by Burger Tombs, they made it clear that the 2 questions I asked for were beyond the scope of the work, and they wanted more money. Keith McCullough said, that's included in our fee. And the 2 questions I said, we have some problems on our assessment roll that should have been caught. Would you have caught it? Yes, we checked that, we spot checked it. The second one is the issue of our connection fees and how we handle that. He said, yes, we would have caught that. All of that included in the fees. So what I'd like to see is somehow, some way, make sure that each one of these firms understand what we want, because I have a feeling, especially talking to Burger Tombs, their $57,000 is going to go up significantly if we have them to do extra work. I somewhat got that same thing from McDermott Davis, that their work is going to go up and their price is going to go up if they have to do this other work. Whereas Keith McCullough said our price is good. So I don't know that we're got some apples and apples here. I think we have a little apples and oranges, but I would go along with the idea of bringing these people in. They got to travel a long distance for $60,000 contract, $20,000 a year. I just don't know how many of them will do that rather than wanting to do it on a an email or a email basis.
Tony, I want to ask Tony one question before you go on. Tony, are you still there? Tony? Apparently he's-
Yes, I am.
Oh, you are. Okay. I just wanted to ask a question because Mr. Tinkle had stated that he called these people directly to ask them questions, and I just wanted to make sure that that was okay.
It is, as long as it's disclosed, and I think generally you may want to have some discussions in the future about any parameters for board members contacting, so that all the information is provided equally to all the boards, and so that it's a level playing field for all the vendors.
That was my question.
I think the issue is, Tony, we need, if we're going to go that route, that we're going to need a far more significant specification indicating what we want these guys to respond to, because it's quite clear from what we ask for, we're getting apples and oranges.
Yeah, and I guess that's a board function, is to right now, if the board feels that additional items are needed in the scope of the audit work, and that it may not, and just whether or not it was clearly conveyed to the proposers, and if the board feels it was not clearly conveyed to the proposers, the board can say, reject these proposals, modify them, and send them out again. And, and I don't know what the reception would be in the auditing world, but the board has that ability to say that.
Was there a contact with any of these vendors this week on talking to board members by anyone? hearing that,
Are
I
you
guess.
talking to me, Ed, or board members?
Everybody. Anyone.
I've had no contact, I don't.
I had a strange situation come up in talking with one of them. He was talking like a magpie on Tuesday until I had to go to dinner and break up the deal. I said I'd call him back on Thursday, and I've tried to contact him 3 times since. Very interested in doing the work, and no response. Almost as if like he was told, don't talk. I just wanted to find out if there was anybody that had told these guys not to talk to board members, because in my life, that is exactly how you do it. You check this stuff out. Nobody else is checking it out, and it sure as heck isn't on this sheet we've got. I would have never found out that we were comparing apples and oranges until a call.
And I didn't think about calling any of them, because previously, when we have done these types of comparisons, we've been told not to contact.
How do you learn?
Yeah,
I'm
typically,
just-
typically the vendors are not contacted by the entity members performing the activity. They may contact references typically. And usually if there's any communication, it's usually at the staff level, with any vendors as to answering any questions or providing any clarifications on proposals. But again, if the board feels that there's not enough specification or additional items that they, or if the board feels there are additional items they want within the audit scope, the board's well within its ability to, reject all the proposals and to say, well, the audit committee recommends the board not accept any of these. You're sitting right now as the audit committee.
At this point in time, I think we need a better specification to these so that they are all, I hate to use the word bidding, but proposing on the same scope of work.
Well, and I think what's important, especially when you're talking about audit environments, I mean, your audit is your check and balance.
Correct.
That is the point where if anything is missed by staff or oversight, your audit by definition is there to catch that. Ed, if there's areas of concern that you have, and you believe that if these parameters had been explicit and in place, we would have caught this last year, then I think that's, an area that we absolutely need to address. And there's, in my opinion, there's 2 ways we can do this. One, I think Tony mentioned, one, we reject all these and we redefine the scope of work, and send it back out. Or 2, it sounds like to me that what the requirements are in the RFP may not be specific enough and might be open to interpretation. And if that's kind of where you're operating, where as you dug deeper and said, hey, would you have caught this, or does this fall within the purview of the contract as you understand it? If one said, yeah, I think, yes, that if that's what you want us to do, specifically, I think it falls in the scope of the statement of work, it would stay true. Others say, no, it wouldn't. So I think maybe first step is to define the points of clarity on these specific items, push them back, and if we have 2 or 3 that say, oh no, that stays within scope, and others say no, that doesn't, it would be a price adjustment. We can either make a decision either on that price adjustment or the fact that they can't meet it under their current terms, or we kick it back. But if we have any concerns, we have to make adjustments.
Yeah, give us a base or give us a guideline. But what triggered mine was when we had the presentation by the gentleman, what was his name?
Oh, Mr. Gaines.
Gaines, where he clearly made it clear that their scope of work did not include addressing the 2 issues that I brought up.
And that's this week or last week when you talked to him.
Yeah, when he was here at the board, at the last meeting.
And
And-
Stephen wanted, I think Stephen
Yeah.
had it stated.
Well, I think the real issues though, right now, is that we don't have to do this today. We have some time to do it, and I think maybe, if we're having a meeting, we sit down and come up with an itemization of the points we want to have in the scope, send it back to, I certainly don't want to throw these out. Everybody I talked to were very interested in doing the work. I think that the issue was, the problem I ran into is where one was willing to do what I considered more than what the other 4 was willing to do.
Well, and I think, from a top-level standpoint, review of assessments, review of connection fees, review of all revenue, that's already a part of the scope. Now, if you're asking them to do something special, that's probably where they're saying, no, that's not really part of what we do.
That's my point, is if
They
that's
normally would-
if that's implied in the contract,
Yes.
then it's a matter of us providing points of clarity and further defining what the requirement is under that section, and it should be,
That's the
Yeah, in
part
other
of the
words,
contract.
you're
Now, if
almost
they
like
choose, no,
asking-
that's not the way I
if
understand
you're
it, then that
asking
can
for
take
like
them out of the bid.
a special audit of the assessments or a special review of connection fees, that would be above and beyond.
So,
But
one final question to your point. So based on kind of what Ed has brought up and those two areas, do you feel like that those items would fall under current scope as it's defined?
I do believe that, because remember, two things are occurring at the same time. You're having an assessment, a completely new assessment done, and you're also having rate study and connection fee studies. All three of these documents would have to be provided to the
Together.
auditing firm. They'd have to review it and make sure that we are matching it. So again, all of them will be doing sampling of your assessment rolls, sampling of connection fees. If you want them to go through and do 100% review of your assessment roll, go through all the connection fees, that would be special above and beyond all of this, yes. So that's kind of up to the board how they want to address that. But you're already paying professionals independent of the district to do these reports, you know, and then the auditors would make sure that we have implemented those reports correctly.
Mr. Guy?
Thank you. Stephen, based on what you know as to how things are progressing, do you feel that we need a single audit for each of the 3 years under consideration?
I will not know that yet. Now remember, the single audit is not triggered based on what we believe. It's a matter of how much you spend, how much of money that you receive related to the spending. So for 2018, you've already, you received, the state revolving loan that was well over $750,000. That triggers it. I will not know, the district will not know until we, do projects and apply for the state revolving loan, whether or not the subsequent years will require it. So it's not a standard, it doesn't mean you do it once and you gotta keep doing it. Whichever one year you have to go over that 750 threshold, that triggers it. So for sure, I only know about fiscal year 2018.
Take a guess.
My guess is probably, because you have.
We have
quite a-
our plan, we should probably be able to look at that and probably make it some type of assumption on where the
Yes.
funding sources are gonna come from.
I would assume that you would have it for all 3 years, and then some.
It was interesting that 4 of the 5 recognized, whether you talked to them or what they did their research, was cognizant of the fact that we had a single fee. The 5th one here at the bottom added it as an extra and then put if needed. So I don't know if they didn't do the
And
work
that's
or
a-
didn't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, because we provide them your last audit, we provide them your current budget and your future budget, so they get all those documents, themselves, so they should have a very good idea on the makeup of the district, the issues, discussions, so they should have all that as a part of, they get all that background handed to them, basically.
Well, we don't want to pay for it if we don't need it, correct?
Oh, absolutely, you wouldn't.
So you wouldn't want to put it in a base.
It'd be a
in the
base of an extra.
Base of a
Yes.
contract, you'd want to put it in as an alternate,
An
an
extra.
additional alternate.
Yeah. And normally what you do is when you put together your engagement letter, you put on there, here's the base fee. If a single audit is required, here's what it's gonna cost.
Is it possible that you can reach these folks to get the alternate for the dollars for the?
Oh, absolutely.
For the single audit?
Yeah, we work with all 5 of these firms on a regular basis.
I think we ought
My-
to ask them to do that.
My only problem with all this, Bill, is going back to what you said before, is that when you get the equality, I hate selecting professionals on dollars. Because you don't know if somebody's playing a game, they're hurting for work, and they low bid it, you don't know any of that. I much rather rely on their people they've worked with and/or other people that are in your position, Stephen, that have worked with them. And hear what references, yes.
And I would say, if we're gonna go back and clarify the single survey, my question would be, can we also provide a point of clarity, and we can we can tee it up by saying, upon further review, the board wants further clarity on whether these items are included in your interpretation of the contract, and add the additional items, and if, they come back and say, yes, great, then they're included. If they say, no, that's additional cost, what would that additional cost be, and then we add that to the summary. And then I think we're good.
Tony, are you listening to this?
Yes, I am.
And
Good discussion.
is that okay for us to direct Stephen to do that?
Not yet,
Okay,
because right now you are sitting as the audit committee,
okay, got it.
and you're making recommendations to the board. Steve, stop me if I'm wrong from your understanding.
No, that's correct, we keep it separate for a reason.
I understand.
But,
And so you're making a recommendation to the board at the present time. And,
Gotcha.
whatever the recommendation, that's how you treat it later on the agenda. The board takes action based upon the audit committee's recommendation.
Got it. I understand.
Sorry,
Mrs.
be-
Flaherty, that's okay.
All right, with Mr. Tinkle calling the companies, I did try reaching the attorney to find out if we could make phone calls, and we kind of played phone tag. So by today, I figured, so I didn't know if we could that's why I have little markers in my books, because I had questions.
Yeah, I would suggest that the questions are ones that you can ask the various proposers when they come. Or if you have questions you have raised now as to the scope, they can be addressed by clarifying the scope. Those are, all good points that were made.
So I guess that's another question is, are we gonna ask all 5 of these companies to present?
I hate to see them coming here and wasting their time doing this. I think what we've just talked about, we can have Stephen translate later by motion to contact each of them for clarification, to have each one of them drive down here from Orlando or the East Coast, to sit here and go through a 20, 30-minute dog and pony show. I think it's a waste of time. Let them pass on what we know and what we want, and let them respond.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mrs. Flaherty, anything else?
No, that was it.
Mr. Guy?
No, I think that,
Mr. Banks?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tony, for the clarification. So, I guess that brings us to the summary sheet and ranking sheet for auditing proposals, which I guess we're not prepared to do at this time.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, and again, I think the right action, proper action to take is, the audit committee establishes the factors to use for the evaluation of audit services. And also, the ability of personnel, experience, ability, and other factors as determined by the committee to be applicable to, the board's requirements, the district's requirements. So all those items that were mentioned, I guess, would be, in essence, a modification of the proposal. Steve, is that how you indicate that, or the request for proposals?
I don't know if modification or more of a clarification.
Yeah.
We're splitting hairs.
Okay,
maybe.
clarification that would go out to all the proposals. Was there any people that did not submit proposals that expressed an interest and picked up a packet?
No.
Okay.
Just these 5.
Okay, that takes care of that.